Marcus Webb had exactly $140 in his checking account and a boarding pass that was about to change his week in a way he never saw coming. He held his son Tommy's hand as they moved through the jet bridge, both of them tired, both wearing the same navy hoodie they always wore on trips, because it was the only one that fit them both without complaint. They were flying to see Marcus's mother. The doctor had used the word weeks on the phone 3 days ago, and Marcus still hadn't found a way to say that word out loud to his son. At the gate, the airline agent looked at his ticket, frowned at her screen, then smiled in the practiced way people smile when they're about to deliver news they don't fully understand themselves. "Mr. Webb, there was a fare class error on our end. We've moved you and your son to first class. No charge. Our apologies for the mix-up." Marcus almost laughed. A mix-up. He hadn't flown first class once in his life. Tommy's eyes went wide when they stepped through the curtain and saw the wide leather seats, the little dish of warm nuts already waiting, the flight attendant who called him sir, like he'd always belonged there. He did belong there. He just didn't know yet that someone else would decide otherwise. Victor Kane boarded 12 minutes later, phone pressed to his ear, voice already too loud for the cabin. He was the kind of man whose suit cost more than most people's monthly rent, and he wore that fact the way other men wear cologne. Like he wanted you to notice it before he even said a word. He ended his call, glanced at his boarding pass without really reading it, and looked up to find seat 2A occupied by a man in a faded hoodie and a boy clutching a small plastic dinosaur. "This is my seat," Victor said. Not a question. A verdict already reached. Marcus checked his own boarding pass again, just to be sure. "I'm sorry. It says 2A right here. The gate agent upgraded us this morning." "I don't care what some gate agent told you." Victor's voice climbed, and heads throughout the cabin began to turn. "I fly this route every week. I'm a platinum member. I did not pay for this seat, so a man who clearly can't afford it could sit in it with his kids' toys all over the tray table." The cabin went quiet in that particular way. Cabins go quiet. Not silence exactly, but the sound of 40 people trying very hard to look like they aren't listening. "Sir, I think there's just been a mix-up," Marcus said, keeping his voice low, keeping one hand resting on Tommy's shoulder. "I'm happy to have the crew sort it out." "There's nothing to sort out." Victor turned toward the flight attendant now hurrying up the aisle. "I want this man removed from this cabin. Now." Tommy looked up at his father, and in a small voice that carried further than he meant it to, he asked, "Dad, are we in trouble? Is this why Grandma's sick? Because we did something wrong?" The question landed on the cabin like a stone dropped into still water. A woman 2 rows back pressed her hand to her mouth. The flight attendant froze mid-step. And Victor, for one flickering second, so brief most people would have missed it, went still, as though something in the boy's voice had reached a part of him he kept carefully locked. Marcus knelt slightly, keeping his tone steady for his son, even though his own chest had gone tight. "Nobody. We didn't do anything wrong. Grandma being sick isn't anyone's fault. We're just going to see her, and everything is going to be okay." He didn't raise his voice at Victor. He didn't reach for a comeback. He simply turned back to the flight attendant and said quietly, "I'll show you the boarding pass again, whenever you're ready." That was the moment the cockpit door opened. Captain Alan Reyes stepped out in his uniform, calm in the specific way that only comes from 22 years of handling far worse than an argument over a window seat. The cabin seemed to exhale, most of them assuming the captain had come to resolve things the way authority usually resolves things, by asking the inconvenient passenger to leave. He walked past Marcus without a glance and stopped directly in front of Victor Kane. "Mr. Kane, I need a word." Victor straightened, already certain of how this would go. "Finally, someone with sense. Captain, this man is sitting in my—" "That's not why I'm here," the captain said. He held up a tablet. "Your company filed a formal complaint with our operations center 2 days ago about a delay on flight 2140. It went out under your name. It's already circulating publicly, and it happens to be from our largest corporate account. Operations flagged me before boarding and asked me to make sure everything on this flight was handled correctly. He paused. So I checked the manifest myself before we pushed back. Victor's face shifted. Not worry yet. Just the beginning of it. Good. Then you understand why I need this seat back. Seat 2A was reassigned to Mr. Webb this morning due to an overbooking correction. Properly ticketed, properly compensated. The captain's eyes didn't move from Victor's. Your seat is 2C, across the aisle. You never had 2A. You looked at the wrong boarding pass. A murmur moved through the cabin, quiet, but unmistakably a shift in whose side the room was now on. That's not possible. Victor pulled out his phone, thumb fumbling at the screen, and there it was, in plain print. 2C. It had been 2C the entire time. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He looked at the screen, then at Marcus, then, almost involuntarily, at Tommy, still holding his small dinosaur, still watching his father with the particular trust of a child who has just been promised everything is fine and has decided to believe it. Something crossed Victor's face that had nothing to do with the seat at all. He thought, unwillingly, of a woman in a small house 2 states away, of a phone that had rung 4 times last Sunday before he silenced it because he was walking into a meeting, of the voicemail he still hadn't listened to. He thought about how long it had been since anyone had needed him to simply be gentle, and how he had apparently forgotten how. Mr. Kane, I don't particularly care how much revenue your company brings this airline, Captain Reyes said, his voice even, carrying without needing volume. What I care about is that every person on this aircraft feels safe and treated with respect before I take it off the ground. Right now, that isn't true for at least one passenger. So here's what happens next. You take your assigned seat, quietly, or you're the one who leaves this cabin. Not Mr. Webb. You. Victor didn't move. Somewhere behind him, someone began, quietly, to clap. It caught, row by row, not loud, not mocking, just people who had watched something get corrected. Still, Victor stood there. The tablet in the captain's hand seemed less important now than the small boy watching him with wide, uncertain eyes. Victor opened his mouth once, closed it, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, could not find a single sentence that made him look right. Sir, the flight attendant said gently, seat 2C. He went. Silently, without the parting remark he might have made an hour earlier, without looking back at Marcus at all. The rest of the flight was quiet, in the good way. Tommy fell asleep somewhere over the Rockies, his head against his father's arm, the dinosaur still clutched in one small fist. Marcus stared out the window and allowed himself, for the first time in days, to actually breathe. He didn't see Victor for almost 2 hours. When he finally glanced across the aisle, the man wasn't on his phone. He wasn't working. He was simply sitting there, staring at nothing, turning something over that had no easy shape to it. It was another 40 minutes before Victor rose. He didn't walk straight across. He hesitated at his own row first, one hand gripping the seat back, like a man deciding whether a thing was worth saying at all, if it couldn't undo what had already happened. Then he crossed the aisle anyway. Marcus tensed, half expecting round 2. I was wrong, Victor said, quiet enough that it didn't carry beyond their 2 rows. About the seat, about all of it. I looked at that boy and I heard what he asked you and He stopped, started again. I haven't called my mother back in 3 weeks. She left me a voicemail. I still haven't listened to it because I told myself I was too busy. And today I made a stranger's son think he'd done something wrong, over a chair. He shook his head slightly, like the sentence embarrassed him more than the apology did. That's not who I want to be. I don't know how to fix that today. But I wanted you to know I heard him. Marcus studied him for a long moment. Not coldly, just carefully. The way a man does when he's deciding whether an apology is real or just performance for an audience that had already stopped watching. Something in Victor's face, the unsteadiness of it, the fact that he clearly hadn't rehearsed this, told him it was real. "Thank you," Marcus said. "I hope you call her." Victor nodded once and went back to his seat, and this time he didn't pick up his phone for work. He sat with it in his lap, thumb hovering over a contact he hadn't pressed in weeks, not quite ready, but closer than he'd been that morning. When they landed, Marcus carried a still-sleeping Tommy off the plane, toward a hospital room, and a mother who had, by some grace, held on. He never learned whether Victor made that call. But somewhere behind him, in seat 2C, a man who had built an empire out of never being wrong had, for the first time in a long time, let himself be.